Well, we're going to get started with this week's case. You are listening to Killer, and this is the case of Rodney Alcala, the dating game killer.
Lock your doors, bolt your windows, and turn off the lights. We're about to begin.
I know your family, he said, as a second grader Tally Shapiro marched down the street on her way to school. She was trekking down Sunset Boulevard in Los Angeles, California. It was September 25th, 1968. A strange man had approached her along her route and uttered those words after asking if she wanted to ride in his car. She was eventually lured to his vehicle when he asked her to come look at a beautiful picture that he had. The 8-year-old didn't remember much after that. Thankfully for Tally, a bystander witnessed the beige-colored car that was suspiciously following her down the road and reported it to the LAPD. The witness reported that Tally had been taken to the DeLongpre Avenue apartment. Now retired LAPD officer Chris Camacho responded to the call.
Camacho approached the apartment and began knocking on the door. No one answered. He knew someone was inside, so he began threatening to kick the door in. Finally, someone stuck their head out of a window and said they were taking a shower. Camacho kicked the door in once he realized the person would not open their door. He entered the apartment and found Tally Shapiro almost dead. Tally's body lay on the floor of the apartment kitchen, surrounded by blood. Her white Mary Jane shoes haphazardly spread out on the floor, and a metal bar that was used to try to strangle her. Police assumed she was dead and began searching the apartment. They discovered a bunch of photos of young women and pictures, IDs of Rodney Alcala, a student at UCLA. A few minutes later, Camacho walked back into the kitchen and noticed that Tally Shapiro was gasping for air and trying to breathe. She ended up surviving the attack. After the attack, Tally's family moved to Mexico to get away from this violent environment.
Rodney James Alcala, born Rodrigo Jacques Alcala Bucor, which I probably just butchered, August 23, 1943. Alcala is a Mexican-American born in San Antonio, Texas. In 1951, Alcala's family moved to Mexico, but later he abandoned them. 3 years later, his mother and 3 siblings moved to a suburb of Los Angeles, California, when he was around 11 years old. Alcala joined the U.S. Army in 1960 at the age of 17 and served as a clerk. In 1964, he was discharged on medical grounds after going AWOL and hitchhiking back to his mother's house. He was diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder by a military psychologist.
As Alcala weaved his way through the court system over the years, other psychiatrists would diagnose Alcala with narcissistic personality disorder, borderline personality disorder, and later malignant narcissistic personality disorder with psychopathy and sexual sadism comorbidities. After leaving the Army, Alcala graduated from UCLA School of Fine Arts and studied film under Roman Polanski at New York University.
So Rodney Alcala was apparently, a little nuts based on his history in the Army. And a lot of those diagnoses that Craig just read off, those are a lot of them come during, his course as he's going through the court systems and they're analyzing him for trial. So, not all of that stuff is known up front when he first attacks Tally Shapiro. He's a bad dude. I mean, right off the rip, just based off the initial crime that we talked about here. And also if you go through and, read about him a little bit, he leaves the Army, goes AWOL. He's just not quite there. The one thing that we didn't mention is that Alcala has, a really high IQ, according to some sources that I read. And, as you kind of go through the story here and hear all the details, just kind of think about that because, a lot of people want to say he's really smart, but I really didn't get that vibe. I think he was more lucky than smart in a lot of instances.
Yeah, and it was very interesting, I think, that, he joined the Army, was discharged, and then he went the School of Fine Arts route. It seems like kind of two different worlds to me, in my opinion. Granted, he's probably a younger dude, doesn't know what he wants to do with his life, so joins the military, goes AWOL from the military, gets discharged, and then he goes the liberal arts route at UCLA.
Oh yeah, he might have realized right then that it wasn't for him, that structure of the military. He's like, I need something a little more liberal.
And from some of the videos I watched and things like that, it sounded like he was always interested in film and things like that. So a little bit intriguing that he
Yeah.
tried the military first, but at that point in time, we're talking, let's see, 43, 18, wasn't quite the Vietnam War era yet. So, yeah, just an interesting thing that I caught from reading that part.
Yeah. Yeah, it was, I think, 1964 he got discharged. He joined in 1960. So yeah, I mean, you're right in that time, post World War II, military is super glamorized. These guys are heroes. You might want to join the army for that reason, and then you realize later this is not for me. And he was only 17, and I'm pretty sure back then, like the recruiting efforts to get these high school graduate types into the army was pretty hot and heavy back then. So it's a well respected a job. And he was probably going for it on those grounds, or maybe he was just trying to get away for a while. I don't really know, but it is interesting when you see that split happen, like you're talking about. It's like he goes one route and then it's like, see you later, and goes the complete other route. That's kind of strange. People who knew Alcala said he wouldn't hurt a fly, but he turned out to be quite the opposite person. Police continued to search for Alcala, but they could not track him down. Finally, a break in the case came when two girls went to their local post office and saw Alcala's photo on a most wanted poster. They knew him as John Berger, their counselor from an all-girls summer camp in New Hampshire. From the time of the attack on Tally Shapiro in 1968 to his capture in 1971, it had been 3 years. During those 3 years, Alcala went to New York and enlisted in film school at NYU.
When Alcala was tried for the attempted murder of Tally Shapiro, he was able to plead down to child molestation. He received 1 year to life, but the parole board let him go after 34 months. Much of this had to do with the fact that Tally's family relocated to Mexico and did not testify during Alcala's trial. The focus back then was on rehabilitation, which leads to Alcala being let go early.
Yeah, so, clearly right there, that last line. Alcala gets let go early because the focus is on rehabilitation. And they're not, and back then, I mean, you got to remember, this time period it's really weird because you have a lot of serial killers and a lot of bad dudes in the 70s and 80s especially, and like things like pedophilia aren't really talked about, and people don't even really know what it is. And if you listen to the case on like Johnny Gosh and his disappearance, and people think he was abducted and taken into a child sex ring, and like people just like can't believe it. They just can't wrap their heads around it. That's the time we're living in here. And so the focus here isn't necessarily on, hey, this is a bad dude, keep him locked away forever. It's, hey, we can rehabilitate these people, it's like the praying the gay away, like we can fix them. I think we come to figure out later it's pretty hard to do if you can.
There's a lot of fixing to do for a guy who is going to beat and nearly murder a second grader within inches of her life. I can't imagine. There's not a lot. I mean, with the family running away to Mexico, there's not a lot of, personal history or whatever you can read from Tally Shapiro. But I think that's a huge error in judgment when you say you can rehabilitate somebody that can do that to somebody that's, essentially only 7 or 8 years old. That's just insane.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you got this little girl. She's just walking to school. And the intent on this man, right? It's a crime of opportunity. But I'm willing to bet that he's probably spent a little bit of time watching this girl or several different girls walking to school. It's in LA. It's walking distance to your school. You get their habits down, you get their patterns down, you watch them, and then he comes up with this plan. Hey, get in my car, come look at this picture I've got, and it works. It's hard to imagine that would work, but it does. And thank God for Tally that somebody was watching and noticed this dude creeping on this girl, because that is what leads police to him and saves her. So, that right there is, I mean, that should have been the nail in the coffin for the dude. We shouldn't be talking about him anymore. Case closed. But we are. So, let's get into that. After Alcala was released from prison in 1974, he was registered as a sex offender, but no one seemed to notice or care. Within a few weeks of being released, he was arrested for assaulting a 13-year-old girl who accepted the all-too-familiar ride to school. He was paroled again after 2 years under California's indeterminate sentencing. At that time, the focus was still on rehabilitation, so this leads to Alcala getting out again.
In September of 1978, Rodney Alcala appeared on ABC's television game show The Dating Game, in which he wins the date with the Bachelorette, Cheryl Bradshaw. Cheryl decides not to pursue the date with Alcala after meeting him backstage as he seemed, quote, creepy to her. Let's take a listen to Alcala's appearance on The Dating Game.
And welcome to The Dating Game, and we'll get right underway. It's time to meet our first 3 eligible bachelors for game number 1, and here they are. Good luck, gentlemen. Well, let's see. Bachelor number 1 is a successful photographer who got his start when his father found him in the dark room at the age of 13, fully developed. Between takes, he might find him skydiving or motorcycling. Please welcome Rodney Alcala. Rod, welcome. And it's time to meet our young lady for game number 1, and here she is. Here is a young lady with a wealth of experience. She once earned a living massaging feet, but she quit when her boss suggested that she work her way up. Then she taught school in Phoenix, Arizona, and now she's here to educate our 3 bachelors in the art of amour. Welcome, if you will, sensational Cheryl Bradshaw. Hello, Cheryl. Don't sit down yet. Just a minute. Want to make sure everything is straight. You relaxed? You feel okay? All right. You know there are 3 bachelors over there. There'll be 1, 2, and 3. Ask them anything you like to find out more about them, except their name, age, occupation, or income, okay? And we're going to start by having them say hello to you and see how they sound. Number 1, would you say hello to Cheryl, please?
We're going to have a great time together, Cheryl.
Okay.
A bachelor number 1, I am serving you for dinner.
Oh.
What are you called, and what do you look like?
I'm called the banana, and I look really good.
Can you be a little more descriptive?
Peel me.
Welcome back to The Dating Game, and Cheryl, we have reached the moment of truth, as we call it. You heard from the bachelors. You got some great dramatic presentations, some good answers, but now I'm going to ask you a question. Will that date be bachelor number 1, bachelor number 2, or bachelor number 3? Who gets the dates?
Well, I like bananas, so I'll take 1.
Number 1, bachelor number 1, all right. Well, there they go. However, you did leave 1 remaining, and this is your date, and I want to tell you something about him, Cheryl. He's a skydiver, so he's got a lot of nerve. He's into motorcycling. He's also a fine photographer. Say hello to Rodney Alcala. Rodney, come on and say hello. Congratulations, Rod. You did it with the 1 answer.
So when you listen to the clip of Alcala on The Dating Game, you'll notice he seems pretty impressionable, likable, charismatic. I mean, it's a silly game, so the things they say are kind of weird and goofy, but, you know, he's quick-witted. He comes up with good things to say. He's funny. He's charming. Obviously, she liked it, so she picks him. You know, so he's one of those dudes who you can hear him talk, and he's the snake oil salesman, you know? You'd buy anything from him. He could, to quote Tommy Boy, he could sell a ketchup popsicle to a woman in white gloves.
Yeah. And, you know, this is 1978. Let's fast forward to 2018, and some of the context that you hear in that Dating Game clip, I don't think sexual harassment in the workplace was a thing 40 years ago. Just by some of the things the game show host is saying, you know, you don't see game show hosts today walk
Oh, I know.
out, and the first thing he does is give this single girl a kiss, and you can hear it in his voice. He's like, "Oh yeah," kind of like crazy, like, "Damn, I love my job," you know. But then he's starting to make comments about her being a masseuse and getting fired because she was massaging her boss's feet and got fired because she wouldn't move up or something to that effect. I'm like, holy shit. If you said something like that today,
oh yeah,
you'd be out on the street with no job in about 10 seconds.
Oh yeah. You'd be hashtag Me Too'd in about a heartbeat. Yeah, and I noticed that too. You know, when you're listening to the clip, this dude just sounds like a total perv and complete creep, and then you watch it at the same time, and the guy just like, he's like way too excited to be able to like kiss this girl's cheek and just, you know, have his hands all over her. And even some of the things he says about the guys when they, you know, when he's talking about Alcala, he says, I think something to the effect of, you know, he's a photographer and he was developed by the age of 12 or something like that back in his dark room. I don't know, something strange like that. And it's these weird perverted comments. I mean, I know that's kind of the whole shtick of the show, but it is weird taking it through the lens of 2018. 10 years ago, if I would have seen that clip, I probably would have thought nothing about it. But now with all of the stuff that's been going on and all the things that are coming out, it's really, weird.
Yeah, it's definitely weird.
To say the least.
And probably my favorite part of the clip, too, was when they pan into Alcala in the clip and he introduces himself. They come in from that dark, fade in to the focus of the camera or whatever. Dude, he looks like Gene Simmons without the Kiss makeup. The hair is just crazy. Again, this is 78, and I mean, at that time, I'll give away my true age here, but at that time, I'm 4 years old, so I'm sure I have some heinous haircut and clothes just like this dude in the clip.
Yeah, it was pretty rough. He does have Gene Simmons mop hair. Like Gene Simmons has the weirdest long hair I've ever seen on a person. It looks like dog hair to me. Like it's weird.
Yeah,
I don't even know how to describe it. It's like poodle hair
and just real thick. It is weird. And yeah, I mean he could in that clip. He's not necessarily Gene Simmons' twin brother, but he's got that look going on.
Oh, they could be cousins. I mean, easily. Yeah. So it was strange. This is where obviously he gets his moniker of the dating game killer because, once they find out more about this guy, everyone goes back to the fact that he was on the dating game, which is, a fascinating aspect of this case. On June 20th, 1979, a 12-year-old girl named Robin Samso disappeared. On that day, Robin was planning her first day of work at a ballet studio answering phones. Before she headed there, she went to her friend Bridget's house to play. The two girls went down to the beach from Bridget's house to have a cartwheel competition. On their way, they were stopped by Rodney Alcala. He approached the two young girls and asked if he could take their picture. Bridget says that he honed in on them like a shark looking for a seal in the water. Bridget's neighbor happened to be near the area and interjected, asking if the girls were all right. At this point, Alcala tries to obscure his face and takes off walking away quickly. Bridget and Robin head back to Bridget's apartment, a little bit shaken. Robin told Bridget she better get going and picked up her belongings. Bridget had a bike at her house and gave it to Robin to take with her, and that was the last time anyone saw her.
Robin's ballet teacher called her family later that night to let them know that she didn't make it to the studio that evening. Her family searched for hours and days, riding their bikes up and down the street trying to retrace her steps. Police questioned Bridget extensively, and the only thing she could tell them was about the strange man trying to take their picture. On July 2nd, 12 days after Robin disappeared, detectives told her family Robin was dead. Robin's mother wanted to go see her, but the police said, "We can't let you do that." Her mother's response was, "Why not?" Police said that her body was in such bad shape it took 3 days to identify her. Her remains were discovered by a fire crew doing routine maintenance in a remote location, more than 40 miles from where she was last seen. Due to animals scavenging, all that was left of her body was bones.
Bridget was able to provide a description that led to a composite sketch that resembled Alcala. Alcala's parole officer saw the composite sketch and called the police and suggested it was him. Police began investigating him again, and he could not provide an alibi for June 29th. Rodney Alcala was arrested on July 24th for the murder and kidnapping of Robin Samso. Here we are again. This is the third time he's been arrested for doing stuff with little girls. So, if you remember, Tally Shapiro, and there was another time shortly after he got out with another girl, and I don't believe they ever name her. I think in the research her name's Julie J or something that they name her. And then you have him with Robin Samso. And, this guy just keeps getting out of prison and keeps getting these breaks for some reason. You have this whole trail of evidence of this guy in the wake that he's left behind, yet he still continues to get out of jail.
Yeah, and it's, to me, that it's super impressive that the other girl was able to give him a composite sketch that they could hone in on him that quickly. I mean, it's not like today's, time where we have cell phone clips and surveillance footage of every step you take out in public. I thought that was cool that she could give a good enough sketch or a good enough description to where they could sketch him out, and they pretty much honed in on him right away. So I don't know if he was just known as the neighborhood creeper out walking around just checking out little kids all day or what.
Again, I mean, this is the third time that he's going to get arrested, and he keeps getting back out, which is, obviously dangerous because he's a violent sex offender, and he seems to have this fascination with young girls. So they make this composite sketch, and it looks just like him. I mean, I looked at the composite, and it was like spot on. You would, if you knew him and saw this picture, you go, "Yep, that's that dude." There's no doubt. And they say he's so smart, but the dude gets caught instantly every time. He just keeps getting lucky and getting off. Like the leniency of California. That's how he gets off in the first place. Which, it's like, okay. And he gets off again because they're pretty lenient. And so clearly you're not rehabilitating him. He's soliciting another young kid, right? And then ultimately they find her dead.
And ironically, I hate to keep doing this, but fast forward to 2018, I don't know California's judicial system inside and out, but I think now they're one of the states that has a 3-strike rule for, drug possession. So essentially if you get busted like 3 times, you could do life in prison. But this guy is already on his 3rd strike, nearly killed a girl the first time, had the run-in with the second girl, and now he's finally murdered someone. I think she's 12 years old. And again, as we go through this, it's like this guy is a cat. He has 9 lives for the prison system. He keeps getting out, keeps getting these passes, and it's just blows me away.
Yeah, absolutely. It's fantastic to see how this shakes out every time. It's like unbelievable. How the hell do you get out this many times in a row? I mean, it's just it's astounding to me. You watch these guys commit these crimes over and over and over again, and they're violent crimes against young kids. Like, who wants their young kid anywhere near this dude? If you're the judge, how are you letting this guy out of there knowing that this is what happens? If I had an 8-year-old kid, that's the first thing I'm thinking. Would I want this dude in a room with my 8-year-old by himself?
Yeah,
Fuck no, I would not.
No, exactly.
No way.
And you would think at the very least that they would have, considered putting him in some kind of psychiatric unit of the prison at some point, because the dude is obviously crazy as hell. And he needs to be locked away from the general public as a whole, because he's a danger, especially to little kids. And it's definitely a dude that should not have been walking the streets.
Absolutely.
When police questioned Alcala, he denied having been to Huntington Beach, where Robin disappeared. He also denied taking photos of people and said that he could not recall doing so. Police received a break when Alcala's sister went to visit him in jail. During their conversation, he told his sister that he had a storage locker in Seattle. Police don't know about it, so she needed to go clear it out. Police had found a receipt for the locker while searching his home at the time of his arrest. Police go visit the locker and find dozens and dozens of photos featuring mostly younger women. The locker was purchased 9 days after the discovery of Robin. No photos of Robin or Bridget were recovered from the locker. Police found a photo of a girl they were fairly sure that they had seen in the Huntington Beach area quite regularly, so they posted the picture of her in the newspaper looking for someone to identify her. The purpose was to place Alcala in Huntington Beach and prove that he was lying about visiting there.
At this point, police are still trying to pin Alcala to the area at the time. They begin to theorize that Alcala was out hunting for a victim that day. They suggest that he was able to catch up to Robin as she rode her bike and convinced her to get a ride in the car to the ballet studio. Robin may have agreed to join him because she was already running late. The police were never able to find the bicycle that Robin was riding. However, they were able to uncover something else quite interesting. Inside the storage locker, police found a small silk bag with various earrings in it. They showed the contents to Robin's mother, and she was positive 1 pair were hers, and that Robin would often borrow them. In the days following the release of the composite sketch, Alcala got a haircut and changed from long curly hair to shorter straight hair, so a little less Gene Simmons. He also changed the carpet in his car. He told his girlfriend at the time that it was to remove the smell of spilt gasoline.
In February of 1980, Alcala went on trial. The jury convicted Alcala and sentenced him to death. In 1984, his conviction was overturned and it was stated he received an unfair trial. The California Supreme Court ruled that jurors had been improperly made aware of his prior sex crime. In 1986, Alcala was tried and convicted a second time, and again, the verdict was overturned.
This is the luckiest person in the entire world, apparently. You can go around and just, kill people and molest young kids, and we'll just overturn your case. No big deal.
Yeah,
it's
astonishing to me that he's taken to trial and the case gets overturned twice. And then we're talking about 1986 at this point. This is, 8 years removed of the murder of Robin Samso. and this dude is still getting off the hook. I mean,
well, you're almost 20 years after the first time. It's 18 years after Tally Shapiro.
You alluded to the fact earlier that, in some cases or some instances, it was reported that he had a very high IQ, but I honestly think this guy is as dumb as shit, because you get all these chances, you get all these trials overturned. Why in the hell didn't he just turn tail and run? Why didn't he go to Canada, for Christ's sakes, and just get the hell out of there? Because, I mean, he's given so many chances to just basically turn tail and run.
Oh, yeah. And that's like early on, after like the Tally Shapiro stuff, like he does go to New York and ends up in like the New England area for a little bit and like changes his name and does all that stuff. But then he gets caught again because he looks like he has a very distinct look. And so when someone nails that on that composite sketch, there's like no getting around it. This guy just, I mean, he looks like a creep, first of all, but he just, he's got this really, I don't even know how to describe it. Like you said, he has like that almost Gene Simmons look, but his face is a lot thinner and more gaunt. And like in certain pictures that they show of him where he's not smiling or anything, he just like looks super duper
We'll have
creepy.
to grab a screen grab of a picture of this guy and make sure we put it in our chapters when we put together the final audio, because everybody needs to take a look at this dude.
Yeah, it will be definitely in your podcast player that supports chapters. If you take a look during the show, we'll be flashing some pictures around. In 2003, the efforts began to reconstruct a case against Rodney Alcala. A huge break in this case comes to us via DNA technology. Alcala was linked to 3 other unsolved murders: Jill Barcombe, Georgia Wickstead, and Charlotte Lamb. More evidence linked him to Jill Peranto, which occurred just days before Robin Samsoe. All of these murders carried the same MO. The women were left posed, their heads showed they were beaten, and they were all strangled by ligatures. Most of these murders were done in different jurisdictions. Alcala was an intelligent man in some regard. He figured that law enforcement would not share information, so it would be less likely if he were caught that they would get him for all of these horrible crimes, maybe only a small handful. A decision was made to prosecute Alcala with all of the Los Angeles murders together in order to show the jury just how heinous this man was.
Almost 31 years after Robin Samsoe's murder, Rodney Alcala was back on trial. This time, Alcala chose to represent himself. He also chose to take the stand, which allowed the doors to be opened to prosecutors to attack Alcala to use his book he wrote, You the Jury, in 1994 against him. Alcala was now married to the facts he laid out in this book. Alcala disputed claims that the earrings found in the storage locker belonged to Robin Samsoe, however. Another pair showed a DNA match to Charlotte Lamb. In his book, he claimed the earrings were a gift from his sister, but now it was proven that was a lie.
Alcala called Robin's mother, Mary Ann, to the stand during the trial. He tried to assault her character by asking her if she brought a gun to court during the first trial. During an interview for 48 hours, she stated that she did bring a gun to the first trial and was planning to shoot Alcala right between the eyes. When asked what stopped her, she said Robin's hand on her wrist. She recalls smelling the shampoo that Robin would use, and her hand froze, and she couldn't pull her hand from the purse. The scientific evidence that the prosecutors put on display for the other women that were murdered overwhelmed Alcala. He ignored them throughout the trial as if they never happened. The prosecution pushed very hard to get the court to convict him of Robin Samsoe's murder. In a surprising twist of events, the prosecution called to the stand Tally Shapiro, Alcala's first known victim. If you remember, she did not testify during her trial. After the testimony, for the 3rd time, a jury convicted him of murdering Robin Samsoe. He was also charged with murdering Jill Peranto, Charlotte Lamb, Georgia Wickstead, and Jill Barcombe.
After the sentencing of Alcala, the police released photos of more than 100 young women and even some children from his storage locker in Seattle. Police at this point are hoping the family and or the subjects themselves will help identify the people in the photographs to determine if there were any more victims. In 2013, a family member recognized a photo of Christine Thornton, whose body was found in Wyoming in 1982. Christine went missing in 1977. In 1982, her body was discovered in Sweetwater County, Wyoming, but not identified until 2015 using DNA. Alcala admitted to taking photos of the woman, but not to killing her. She was 6 months pregnant at the time of her death. Alcala was deemed too ill to stand trial in Wyoming and remains in California State Prison awaiting his death sentence.
A few other items I wanted to touch on during this case, because you have kind of these few big blocks of the case with Tally Shapiro and then, Robin Samsoe. And then there's obviously these last people who come into play here during the last Robin Samsoe trial. In 2010, Seattle police named Alcala as a person of interest in the murders of Antoinette Whitaker, murdered in 1977, and Joyce Gaunt, murdered in 1978. Alcala rented a storage unit in 1979 in that area, and items belonging to these two women were found there. In 2011, San Francisco police feel they have enough evidence to link Alcala to the murder of Pamela Jean Lamson. No charges were filed due to the lack of DNA evidence. In 2013, a Manhattan judge sentenced Alcala to an additional 25 years to life for the murders of Cornelia Crilly, 1971, and Ellen Hover, 1977. So, just to recap there quickly, those last two happened in the, during the 70s. Most of these happened in the 70s, and they're just now starting to discover these links to Alcala. So he was a very busy man during this time.
Yeah, and just to recap the complete list of his victims, we'll start at the top. Tally Shapiro survived the attack. She was the first victim when he was originally arrested. Cornelia Crilly, 1971. Ellen Hover, 1977. Antoinette Whitaker in 1977, where he was just a suspect in the case. Jill Barcombe, 1977. Georgia Wickstead, 1977. Pamela Jean Lamson, 1977, which he was accused of that murder. Christine Ruth Thornton, 1977. He would later be charged in that case in 2016. Joyce Gaunt, 1978, where he was, again, a suspect in that case. Charlotte Lamb, 1978. Jill Parento, 1979. And then Robin Samso. So that list is crazy, and it's obvious rehabilitation did not work for this dude. That's just a crazy, crazy list of girls.
No, and the scary part about this whole list is it's not the complete list. They're finding people and connecting him as early, like recently, 2016, I think. That might have been the most recent one that I found during research. But they had that locker, and it has pictures of hundreds of girls, and there are, I think, even some young boys in there. And the police released, I want to say it was like a few hundred photos or 100 photos. I think that you stated that earlier, to the public for them to try to identify people in these photos, because they're trying to link them to Alcala and figure out who they are, where they are, and maybe that they're an unsolved murder case somewhere, and they just don't know who the person is. And there were also like an additional, like almost 1,000 photos that were too graphic for police to release. And you can still go out there today and go find these photos and look at them. So if you are interested, I'll put a link to that in the show notes so that you can go check that out. But basically, it's just a huge spread of photos of a bunch of young women, and people are just trying to figure out, who they are and, what their link is with Alcala. So clearly, there's even a huge gap in that list from so you have Tally Shapiro happened in 1968, and then you had Cornelia Crilly in 1971. He was in prison during some of that stretch, but then again, he doesn't strike till 1977. So, I believe he gets out of prison in 74. So there's a 3-year gap there, which he was up to no good. They just didn't know about it.
And they said they found hundreds and hundreds of photos in that storage locker that he had in Seattle. I don't know. It's crazy to think about how far this actually could have stretched, or how many of those victims kind of fell off the radar, went unidentified.
Yeah, there's probably a bunch of missing persons or whatever where they find the body, but they're just a Jane Doe. They don't know who she is, don't know where she went, don't know how long she's been there, and just trying to roughly piece some of the stuff together. And this dude was all over the country. So who knows who all he left in his wake. Like Cornelia Crilly, I believe, happened in New York. And then you've got a lot of these women in California. Mm-hmm. I think there's even one in Wyoming. And then, so he's all over the place.
He could have abducted and killed people from coast to coast. I don't know. We didn't read into the research enough to see how he traveled to New York City, but my assumption is he had a cross-country road trip. So, there were probably so many crimes of opportunity along his way, during that trip. It'd be interesting to piece the timeline together to see if that's what happened when he went to New York, where, hey, I'm going to stop off in Wyoming. And that happened to that other girl. It's it's really sad when it comes right down to it that he kept getting all these chances, and then, the victims paid the ultimate price, but, the judicial system did not do its job in this case whatsoever.
No, not at all. And, he leaves California, right after he's released from prison the first time. Well, he's actually a fugitive when he goes to New York and New Hampshire, and he's going under that alias of John Berger. So he right away, he left from California, and he probably drove from California to New York / New Hampshire area, New England. So who knows? Like you're saying, who knows who's in his wake from California to New York? I mean, you cross the entire country, coast to coast. What the hell? I guarantee you, there's just based off this list. I mean, he's been caught several times, and he doesn't stop. So to think that there's not more victims attributed to him is probably a complete understatement.
No, because I'm sure there were a lot of these cases where they have these unidentified remains and they weren't able to link DNA. The one case wasn't linked to DNA until, was it 2010? It's irrelevant, but there are probably just so many cold cases with this guy. I can't even imagine.
It was 2003. Yeah, they started linking 4 cases to him in 2003. There were more after that, but 2003 was when they first started linking him to the additional cases. The fact that California let this guy go so many times, and look at all the bodies that were left in his wake, They didn't know that at the time. They only knew of 2 offenses. But, I mean, this is the kind of stuff that happens with these kinds of offenders. Like, this is why you don't take that risk and let these people out into the public so soon. Because they end up doing things like this. It's disgusting. I mean, how many families were affected by this guy going and killing or abducting and, disposing of women? Like I said, there's so many more women in his wake that we don't even know about that are who knows where. And police are trying to figure out who these people are.
Yeah, just from the list we recapped, there were 12. I mean, Tally Shapiro survived, but, 12 on our list that we know of. Then a couple where
Barely.
he was, just a suspect, but most likely the offender.
And that's the thing. Like, yeah. And, this dude is obviously a narcissist. He's diagnosed as such by several psychologists. He thinks he's smarter than everyone. He represents himself at trial. And, the prosecution is going through and just, nailing him on stuff, and he has nothing to say. These 4 additional women that get brought up to him, linked by DNA, he ignores it during the case and acts like it just didn't even happen. Just talks about robbing Sam, so that's all he talks about. Because that's all he was prepared for. He sat in his jail cell and just read through all the police reports. He was able to retain that information. He was able to present it in a way that was somewhat clear. But he's also a maniac. And at the end of their trial, like in one of his closing arguments, he plays some sort of crazy song. We might have to grab that clip and put it in here, because he plays this crazy song about killing and murder. And right there, the jury is just like, this guy is an absolute lunatic. The song is called Alice's Restaurant by Arlo Guthrie. It goes on for 18 minutes. I'm going to play a portion of it for you now.
I went down to get my physical examination one day, and I walked in, I sat down, got good and drunk the night before, so I looked and felt my best when I went in that morning. 'Cause I wanted to look like the all-American kid from New York City. Man, I wanted to feel like I wanted to be the all-American kid from New York. And I walked in, sat down, I was hung down, brung down, hung up, and all kinds of mean, nasty, ugly things. And I walked in, I sat down, they gave me a piece of paper, said, "Kid, see the psychiatrist, room 604. And I went up there, I said, "Shrink, I want to kill. And I want to kill. I want to see blood and gore and guts and veins in my teeth. Eat dead, burnt bodies. I mean, kill. And I started jumping up and down, yelling, kill. And they started jumping up and down with me, and we was both jumping up and down, yelling, kill.
So as you can hear, that's a live recording of that song, and it's just a little bit silly and strange, and it's performed in front of an audience, and obviously it's comedic, but I just wanted to play that for you guys just so you could get a sense of the kind of things that he was presenting during his trial. And I'm putting this in post-recording without Craig to give his feedback on it, but I just wanted to throw that in there, and this is kind of in the middle of a little bit of a segment, and we're going to join back to the rest of the conversation now. And you have to actually hear the song, because it's like not really I would say like a song. You know, it's just like this crazy mishmash of some guy screaming about killing people, and might be some guitar in the background. I mean, it's bizarre. You know, he's a lunatic, and he's the sad and unfortunate thing in this case is that he's still alive today. He's still sitting in prison, getting his 3 meals a day, and his outdoor time or whatever, while all these people were killed.
Yeah, and one thing that we didn't touch on, well, we touched on it early in the case when we were discussing, his educational background and things, but he studied under Roman Polanski. And I don't want to take this discussion down a completely different tangent, but that guy, as we all know, has a serious checkered past. I mean, not to mention the fact that, he was married to Sharon Tate, which was killed by Charlie Manson in those murders, right? But then you fast forward, and then he's right in the center of this huge sex abuse case. So, and I'm not going to draw any correlation there, but I mean, maybe there is something there. What if this Polanski dude planted some of this sick behavior in him as a student when he was, studying under him?
Yeah, I mean, who knows what their interactions were? It is mentioned as kind of like a line item in research, but I don't know. I don't know what their relationship was like, but it is just curious to connect the two together and note that, these two weirdo sexual sadists are, connected at some point in history,
and
which is
not to mention
strange.
Polanski is tied, like I said, to the Sharon Tate's murder and the Manson family. So right there, you're looking at one of the most notorious cases, of a killer in history. This is crazy.
Oh yeah. Well, the thing that gets me with the Charlie Manson stuff, though, is that like he didn't actually kill anyone, right? Like he just like told people to go kill people, and obviously that's not good. That dude is a lunatic and deserves to rot in prison, like he did. But it's always funny how he gets attributed to this stuff, but it's like someone else actually had to go kill somebody. He never killed anyone. He was just the nutcase behind it all. But yeah, it is strange, that connection that you bring up and all that stuff. I don't know. The thing that struck me about this dude, about Alcala, was that he would use this photography ruse, and man, did it seem to work. And you connect that. I mean, this was the 70s, right? Look at today, and look at how people are constantly obsessed with taking selfies and photographs of themselves and video of themselves. Back then, you didn't have cell phones. You didn't have instant access to photography like you do, in your pocket. And some guy comes up and wants to take your picture. Like, these girls are like, yeah, take my picture. Like, think about how it is today. And we all make fun of it, Oh, yeah, you got these stupid girls taking her selfie again. She got to take 20 of these pictures. You see them in the car taking Snapchats of themselves, until they get the right one at the stoplight, because they just can't wait. So how easy of a ruse was this back then?
I don't know. With today, people are obsessed with taking selfies and doing this and that, but I don't know. Some random dude that looks like this guy walks up to you on the street with his cell phone and says, hey, can I take your picture? I think that's going to set some alarms off.
Well, right. The times are different in that regard. But what I'm saying is, the culture that we've noticed where when people have the camera in their pocket, that they would just want to take pictures of themselves. This guy was walking around saying, hey, I want to take your picture. And that sparked that thing that people have now. I mean, obviously the creepy, like, predator part of it has now been ingrained in our culture where it's like, okay, if someone comes up to you and wants to take your picture, they're a creep. But back then, he would do it under the ruse of like, I'm an editor of a magazine, and I want to take your picture for this magazine. And girls are like, yeah, let's take my picture, woohoo, that kind of thing. And you look at girls today, and they they have their phones out taking pictures of themselves, and guys too, but it's mostly women that get this thrown on them. That's the kind of mentality that you have to sort of apply to back then. When these girls are getting approached, they don't really, again, back to the whole thing I said earlier, creeps and pedophiles were not necessarily as widely known. I mean, you knew about it, but it wasn't like a thing. Like when I'm in school, you got stranger danger, right? And that's getting just like blasted into your head all the time. Stranger danger, don't talk to strangers, blah, 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 blah. And yeah, it was to some extent then, but it was still a different time. You slept with your house completely unlocked. Your car was unlocked. You didn't care about these things. And then you've got this guy who's coming in with these bad intentions, and he's like, snake oil salesman, right? And he's throwing this thing in front of you. Oh, I'm a photographer for a magazine. Here you go. And the girls are like, oh yeah, I'd like to be in a magazine. That would be cool, And then he lets them just go take pictures of them.
Yeah, I don't know. It's baffling to me. Again, how could this guy be free to walk the streets for as long as he did and do as much damage as he did to all these girls and all these families?
Yeah, you're 100% right.
Some of the audio that we looked at and some of the different clips, I think you found one of the best ones with Robin Samso's mom, where she came in on the end of that one interview, and she didn't hold back.
Oh, so speaking of that, I'll play that clip for you now, and then we'll talk about that in here in just a second. So take a listen. This is Robin Samso's mother talking about Rodney Alcala and kind of how she feels about him now. And obviously, remember, I mean, she took a gun to the very first trial, and she wanted to shoot this dude in the head, and she didn't. So just take a listen.
I don't want him to go to no other states and be held accountable for nothing else, because he can only be killed once. I want him to die here. I want to live one day longer than him. I want to live one day without feeling or hearing the name Rodney Alcala in my mind. I could die a happy woman.
I mean, that's just powerful. That's Robin Samso's mother. Basically, she's just saying, she wants him dead, and she wants to see it happen. And that's all these years later, right? I mean, I think that was that was pretty recent. That was after he was convicted again. I think that video might have happened in 2013 or something, that we pulled that audio from. And she just wants to see that guy die. That's all she wants.
What's your thoughts on if she would have actually went through with killing this dude in court? If she would have pulled the gun out and killed him, how many lives would she have saved by doing that?
I kind of feel like I would have done the same thing she did. I try and think about that, like, what would you do if it was your kid and you knew that this guy did it? Like, there was no surprise. It wasn't a secret. Like, it happened. You knew it happened. And you knew it was this creep. And I think I would take jail time. I think I'd kill him and go to jail for it.
Yeah,
I really do.
The crazy thing is it's 2018 and you're not going to carry a gun into court. Of course, unless you 3D print it and then it's untraceable by a metal detector, right? But there's no way in hell you're going to get a gun into a court. But the ironic thing is, had she went through with it and killed this dude in court, obviously the court system and the judge doesn't know the extent of what he did at that point in time, the full list of victims.
Right.
She would have saved so many lives by doing that right up front. But yet, her killing him in public like that, she most likely would have went to prison for life. And then, the tables are turned on her at that point. And then, everybody's there and witnesses it. She kills this dude, even though, in my opinion, he completely and totally deserved it. She would have went to prison for the rest of her life. But,
she would have, but remember, Robin Samso comes at the end of this list, so she wouldn't have saved anybody.
That's true.
I mean, she would have just given him some justice, but he wouldn't be leeching off the system today. However, nobody would have been saved from that.
Yeah,
I still would be down
right.
with
That
it.
would have been vindication at that point, and I would have been totally with it too. It sounds like her life is completely and totally ruined. The only thing she wanted in life was to live one day longer than this dude. So maybe going to prison for killing this dude would have been, all that she needed to get, her justice in her mind, or her peace of mind. It wouldn't have mattered at that point.
Yeah, she just wants to see him go down before she does. And I don't blame her. If that happened, I oftentimes think about stuff like this when we research these cases. You get into this dark place. And I sometimes think about, how would my life be, not just me, but like my wife and stuff. Like, how would that be, going forward? Like, I feel like that would just ruin us. Like, our marriage would probably be ruined because we both would be so broken, and I don't know what would happen. And you got to think about that. Like, this stuff happens to people, and then it just ruins them. So you didn't just kill that person. you ruined their family, you know? And you'll see in a lot of cases, you know, stuff like this happens, and then the couple divorce because they just can't deal with each other anymore because they're so grief-stricken, or one of the two is way more than the other one and can't get past it while the other person is just trying to move on but keeps getting drugged down by this, you know, from their partner. And, you know, it's really sad. And I don't know what happened to Robin Samso's mom and you know, their family specifically, but she sounds like she's still broken. You know, like she never got over it.
She said she never wanted to hear his name mentioned again, ever. So it completely, you know, from our observation, it completely and totally ruined her life. And I'm sure it ruined the lives of other people in her family, just like you said. That trickle-down effect, it's, you know, it's hard to say how far that reached.
Yep. Well, that will conclude today's episode. We'll put the case file down for Rodney Alcala, and we will be putting out another episode next Monday. So if you enjoyed the show, please rate us wherever you listen to podcasts. Again, I want to say thanks to those of you guys who keep listening. We're happy to do this show. Craig and I bust our ass trying to put out a show every week, so it can be tough at times. And so far, we've hit every Monday we've been trying to. So let's keep it going. Again, I wanted to plug our special show that we're working on. It's going to be a bonus episode, a Halloween show, and you know, that'll be out sometime in October. I'm tentatively thinking the week before Halloween. I think, or the 29th, I think, is actually the first Monday before Halloween, or last Monday before Halloween, I should say. So that's what we're going for, trying to hit October 29th with a new bonus episode, which will be pretty awesome. If you'd like to support us, head out to our website, www.killerpod.net, and you can click the support button at the top of the page. Also, in your podcast player, there is a link in the show notes. If you would be so kind, you could engage us on social media. We are on Twitter @killer_podcast, because some jerk took the full string. On Instagram @killerpodcast. We're on Facebook, facebook.com/killerpodcast, or you could email us, killerpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks again for everyone who keeps listening. We love doing the show. We hope you like it. If you have any feedback for us, have any case suggestions, if you just want to say hello, please feel free, hit us up. Probably most active on Instagram because it's easy to publish to all the other platforms from Instagram. And quite honestly, it's a lot nicer than Twitter is. Craig, any parting words?
Really enjoyed the show this week. Looking forward to that Halloween episode just coming up here in a few weeks. So appreciate everybody tuning in, listening to the show, and keep this thing going.
All right. That's it for us. Stay safe.